Welcome to Women and Resistance, a powerful podcast where we honor the courage, resilience, and revolutionary spirits of women across the globe. Hosted by Aya Fubara Eneli Esquire and Adesoji Iginla, we uncover untold stories of defiance against systemic oppression, whether colonialism, racism, sexism, or economic injustice. From historic icons like Winnie Mandela and Fannie Lou Hamer to today's trailblazers, we shine a light upon those shaping a more just world. This is a call to honor the past, embrace the present, and build an empowered future. Yes, greetings, and welcome to another episode of Women and Resistance, a platform where we navigate and recall the lives, interesting times of powerful women who have helped carve the narrative about our present existence. And today is no exception. Today we're going to the South, the antebellum South, and we're going to be talking to Anna Julia Cooper. Who is Anna Julia Cooper? We would hear in the course of this hour of a conversation. But without further ado, Miss Cooper, welcome.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Good evening.
Good evening. So we now know the name. Could you first and foremost give us an idea of what time you existed in? Because I think that will set the context for the conversation.
Of course I will. You know, I lived a very long life. I was born in 1858 in Raleigh, North Carolina. 1858.
Okay.
Lived long enough to actually witness the civil rights movement. And so I did not make my transition until 1964. I'm really glad you started off by asking me that question because I think it's important when we engage with any material. Critical thinking has always been very important to me as an educator. What I wanted above all else was to help people question the information they were receiving, decolonize the mind, as you will. And so asking, who am I speaking to and in what period of time did they even exist? It's a simple question, but it's a brilliant question because it's important to locate people and cultural experiences in time, even as we begin to see how cyclical things can be as well.
Correct.
So, yes, I was born, as I said, in 1858. Now, think about it, all of you listening. That was before the Civil War in the United States, wasn't it?
Yep. Before the
So
Reconstruction period as well.
I was born, and my birth date is given as August 10th, 1858. And although today I am known, or should be known, as Dr. Anna Julia Cooper, I came from what we would definitely agree were very humble beginnings. My mother, Hannah Stanley Haywood, was enslaved by George Washington Haywood, one of the sons of North Carolina's longest-serving state treasurers, who went by the name John Haywood. Incidentally, he is also one of the founders of the University of North Carolina, which just goes to show you that when we talk about education, it's not just about getting letters behind your name. It absolutely has to encompass an education of the mind, of your morality, of who you are as a human being. Because, for all intents and purposes, though my mother would not speak of it, she was not married to my father, and I was conceived, one would surmise, against her will. And I am saying that to be very polite in how I speak. And I hope that your audience understands full well what it is that I am gesturing to.
Yeah.
Now, the records aren't completely clear whether my father is George who enslaved my mother or his brother, Dr. Fabius Haywood, who enslaved her older brothers, Rufus and Andrew. But of course, when you're talking about mere chattel, what is it to be shared amongst brothers? George, one of my supposed fathers, became state attorney for Wake County, North Carolina, and together with his brother, they owned a plantation in Greene County, Alabama. And after my birth, for years, I worked as a domestic servant in the Haywood home, as did the older brothers that I mentioned, Andrew and Rufus, who were also enslaved and who later served in the Spanish-American War. Rufus also eventually became the leader of a musical band known as the Stanley's Band. So my mother, although at that time it was still against the law for people of African descent, call us Negroes as we were called then, colored people, to be educated. My mother could read. She could read her Bible. She wasn't, a great scholar, but what she could read and what she did know, she taught me studiously. And so after the Civil War, when freed Black men and women clamored for education, and when I say clamored, I want you to understand that we pursued opportunities to learn and opportunities for our children to learn as though it was as precious as oxygen itself. So important I share that with you today when too many of our young people are eschewing study and the discipline of the mind that comes about when you apply yourself. You apply yourself to really build those synapses, you make those connections and you really build up your mind. And too many of us, I fear, have been taken over by just entertainment. And this is to the detriment of not just our race, but to the world as a whole. Yes. And so after the Civil War, the freedmen and women clamored for education, and the St. Augustine Normal School was opened. It eventually also became a collegiate institute. And we had children and young people and some older people of all ages, all in this one building. Sometimes in the same class, everybody just trying to acquire knowledge to the best of their ability while doing whatever other work we had to do to keep body and soul together. And it was under these circumstances that I, at approximately the age of 10, was enrolled in St. Augustine Normal School. And I soon became what you might consider a teacher's assistant in the sense that I was one of a few students who already could read at some level. And I very quickly was able to progress through my studies and actually began to tutor other kids. And so upon completing all the studies that I could at the school, I actually was engaged as a teacher at that same institution. The Reverend J. Brinton had offered a scholarship to help pay for my expenses while I attended St. Augustine School. And I want to really point this out because back then, and I think we still have that, pockets of that, everybody came together in the Black community, and we had some allies outside of the Black community, to do whatever we could to assist our youth to become the best that they could be. I think that you have spoken with other women, including when you talked with Nina Simone, who also talked about people in the community gathering resources in order to make it possible for her to continue with her musical education. And so here at St. Augustine School, the educational levels ranged from the primary level all the way to, if you would consider it, high school, and of course training skills as well. And so for 14 years I was a student and a teacher. And I did get married. I got married and I was widowed by the time I was 21 years old. Before we continue, so some things that I just want to highlight, and this would make more sense as we continue to talk a little bit about my life and how I see the world. My father, who owned my mother, at least in his mind, was also an Episcopalian clergyman. He was a minister. I paused there for impact, for the contradiction to sit with you, because I believe that today we continue to see those contradictions play out, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
As we see men and women of the cloth wholeheartedly embracing what one must truthfully acknowledge is evil. We see them embracing inhumanity.
Even
From my
justifying
first breath, I lived inside this great American lie that morality and domination could coexist somehow. That one could preach salvation on Sunday and deny humanity every other day of the week. And did we just not witness that in Minneapolis, where there was a protest at a church? Wasn't there?
That's the case.
A pastor
who was supposed to be leading the flock is also an immigration officer.
Well, I think you're putting it rather nicely, aren't you, young man?
Also, a member of the Gestapo, as they describe them.
Be one way to look at it. However, I must say this, for many of us who continue to live within this lie, that even as a child, I understood something that this nation did not want me to know, and that they still don't want us to know.
Which is?
And that is that intellect cannot be owned. And that dignity does not require permission. In fact, if your audience were to get a copy of my book, which is, interestingly enough, widely accessible, given that this book was written in the 80s, if I'm not mistaken, I have to go and jar my memory. You know, you get older and you start forgetting some things. But I wrote, the colored woman of today occupies, one may say, a unique position in this country. She still does, the Black woman in particular, which is why this regime that you guys are under has so viciously attacked Black women in a way that no other group of people have been attacked.
Considered a threat to the system.
Absolutely. Yes, I was indeed correct. If the memory served me right, A Voice from the South was published in 1892, and I believe it was the first full-length book of its kind published by
a woman.
Yes, and of course a Black woman at that.
Yeah.
But let me tell you about my first act of resistance, because when you reached out to me, you said this was a
series about women and resistance.
Series, yeah, you called it. It's a podcast. We did not have those in my time. When I entered St. Augustine School, the doors were certainly open to me. They were open to the children of the freedmen and, even older freedmen and women who wanted to get an education. But those doors were only open about halfway for me. Do you know why?
I was about to ask the question. Why would that be the case? You are listening to Women and Resistance with Aya Fubara Eneli Esquire and Adesoji Iginla, where we honor the voices of women who have shaped history through courage and defiance. If you're finding these stories inspiring, take a moment to subscribe, share, and support this platform. Together, we amplify the voices that deserve to be heard. Now, back to the conversation.
Well, on occasion of my gender. See, the boys were being trained for the mine, and the girls were to be trained
for the home.
for service. The boys studied Greek and Latin, and the girls studied domestic science. And I noticed this. And so I asked, boldly I may add, why could I not study Greek? And I was told, politely, that it was unnecessary. Critical thinking. Unnecessary for whom? Unnecessary as determined by whom? I insisted. I persisted. I pressed. And finally, they allowed me, a female, a woman, to study the classical curriculum. Not because the system believed in me, but because I refused to accept the limits that were being placed on me. Listen, young people, and I can very comfortably call all of you young people. You gotta live 104 plus years on the face of this earth for me not to call you a young person. Education. It's never merely just education. It is permission. It is access. It is power. Even back then, my philosophy, which I later wrote about, was simply this. There is no force in the world more powerful than a woman determined to rise.
True.
And so I speak to my sisters, whatever your current lot in life, your determination must be stronger than those forces. Your determination to live life on your terms. Well, my husband and I were married from 1877 to 1881. Sorry, to 1879. Mere 2 years. I was teaching at St. Augustine School. And he died, of course, extremely prematurely. I did not know it at this time as a very young woman of 21 years old, but when I got married, but I realized that I was not going to get married again. Believe in womanhood. I'm also very clear that there are requirements of us as women. And sometimes I wonder, had my husband lived, what course my life would have taken. I doubt it would have been the same. Nevertheless, I chose to advance my studies and I went on to Oberlin College. Hopefully, your guests have heard of Oberlin College.
Yeah.
In fact, I believe you have interviewed another graduate of Oberlin College, one who suffered terribly from time to time while she was there, but persisted. Nonetheless, there at Oberlin College, even there, women were also offered a choice, the ladies' course or the classical course. The ladies' course was shorter, was softer, was designed to polish, not to challenge. You know, the irony of all of this is to think of the lives that enslaved African women lived.
As grueling
where
as
we considered softer when we were being brutalized out in the fields.
No.
Where our quota of cotton
Tobacco.
Reduced because of our gender.
Nope.
So how is it that when it comes to studies that could take us further in terms of training our minds, all of a sudden our gender comes into play? Chose the classical course, and I earned my Bachelor of Arts in 1884. I went back to teach at St. Augustine, and then I came back again to Oberlin, and then earned my master's degree in 1887. And one of my classmates is someone that you may have heard of, and that is Mary Church Terrell. But we studied Latin, we studied Greek, we studied French, English literature, math, and science. I chose not to just do the ladies' course, even though the administration actively discouraged women from pursuing higher level courses. A.C. Cooper was the name of my husband, but like I said, that marriage did not last that long. As a student at Oberlin College, I was part of the LLS, one of the 2 literary societies for women, and our programs regularly featured lectures by distinguished speakers as well as singers and orchestras. I would go on to teach at Wilberforce University for a while, and I bring up the literary society just to buttress a point with all of you who maybe mature yourself and thinking about what you should do with your time, but for also those of you who may be in a position to help to train the next generation. It is very important that you expose them to discourse and events that challenge
Their mind.
their minds. Yes. I particularly went after the classical courses in college, not necessarily because I was seeking distinction, but because I was acutely aware that what you deny women access to, you deny humanity access. When you deny women access to anything that is going to help them progress, you deny humanity access to that same progress. Think about it. Who is typically the first teacher of a child?
The woman.
Does it therefore, on a very fundamental level, does it therefore not make sense that the very first teacher of most children, is herself equipped to teach? That she herself has had the opportunity to develop her mind so that she might be able to shape the minds of the children? So I did not remarry. I did not have children of my own. But I did not live without family either, so don't go weeping for me. My life was far from empty. Some of you women right now, you are just tied up in this mindset of, oh my God, if this didn't happen or if that happened, my life is over. No, it's not over unless you believe it's over and act in that way. At a point in my life, I took in my nephew. Actually, at a point in my life, I took in the 5 children of my half-brother after his wife died. Opened my home and I fostered many, many children. And I made sure not to just provide them with a roof over their head and food in their belly, but to also make sure that I helped to train their minds. And so although I did not biologically have any children, I mothered generations. So I do not at all find motherhood limited to biology. I eventually moved to Washington, D.C., where I worked at the M School, which eventually became known as Dunbar. And this was the elite school that trained up Black students from across the country, but mostly, a lot from that area, but across the country came to that school to get the kind of education they could scarcely find anywhere else. And we went on to send those children to all the so-called best universities and colleges across the country. While I was there, I published my book, like I told you, A Voice from the South, in 1892. The reason this book continues to resonate today, it was not a polite book, but it was a necessary book. And even though written over a century ago, the themes that I address in this book are still worthy of
contemplation today.
Absolutely. Today we have the term intersectionality.
Intersectionality, yeah.
But I was already writing about that. White women spoke of suffrage while stepping over Black women. Black men spoke of racial uplift while expecting the silence of Black women. This was not a polite book. Although there are some who see it as what they now call a feminist book, a Black feminist book, there are others who are also pretty critical of it because they feel that I was ascribing a particular role to women. There's a quote that is taken from this book, and that actually is the title of a book published by Paula Giddens called When and Where I Enter. And what I said was, only the Black woman can say, when and where I enter, in the quiet, undisputed dignity of my womanhood. We'll love to stop there. But the rest of it says, then and there, the whole Negro race enters with me. My point being, not to relegate women to just being barefoot and pregnant or Black women to just domestic service. Clearly, I resisted that. Mm-hmm. My point was, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And Black women are such an essential link that if as a race of people, we do not accord Black women the opportunity to develop mind and body and spirit and soul, to come together in the fullness of their humanity, we cripple the entire race. Look at it this way, young man. Look at it this way. And I'd love to hear from those of you, your people are watching and typing. Answer this question. What is a community? What is a nation? When you look at any community, it is made up of what? Families, right? That's yes.
Yeah.
And in any family, I'm telling you, the woman is typically the glue that keeps that family together, and depending on her temperament will also impact the direction in which that family goes. I know, men, some of you might not want to hear this. And so when you oppress and suppress the woman, you oppress and suppress the family. You oppress and suppress the family. How then do you have a strong community? If your communities are weak, how is your nation strong? All I'm saying is I refuse hierarchy, and I certainly was very clear that I reject the concept of gradualism. You know, Booker T. Washington and I clashed quite a bit during my time because I absolutely felt, listen, we already had a lot of skills. We knew how to work the land. We knew how to use our hands. But we also had to absolutely develop the mind. And one did not need to be neglected for the other. And so, with all due respect to Dr. Washington, this idea of us just waiting and hoping that white people will get beyond their fear, get beyond seeing us as always, well, your grandfather was enslaved by mine, therefore you are always inferior to me, that they will naturally come about a higher consciousness or a higher level of morality, and we just wait around until when and such a time, as opposed to doing what we must do to uplift ourselves. That was something that was concerning to some. But I believe this, the cause of freedom is not the cause of a race or a sect or a party or a class. It is the cause of humankind. Do you know where those words can be found today besides in my book? You would be surprised. Would you like me to tell you?
Please do.
Any United States of America citizen who has a passport should turn to pages 24 and 25 of their passport, and there they will find my words. The cause of freedom is not the cause of a race or a sect or a party or a class. It is the cause of humankind.
Okay.
Yes.
So everybody's carrying that around in their pockets.
And maybe not even being aware of where it originated. Let me speak very briefly about power, and then I might just shut up and see what questions you for me. I'm an educator, so we are used to speaking, but I also absolutely believed in the Socratic method as well. But I want to speak plainly about power. I served as principal of Street High School in Washington, D.C. And as I told you, it was one of the finest Black secondary schools in the nation. Under my leadership, we emphasized classical education, Latin, Greek, advanced mathematics. Isn't it funny that today some parents are upset that their children have to learn one foreign language to graduate from high school? And even that, most of them graduate and are not proficient at it. Did I tell you that I went on to get my PhD at the Sorbonne? And
You
did I
stopped at
tell you?
the master's.
Aha. And did I tell you that I wrote my doctoral dissertation in French? Yes, me, who was born enslaved. So tell me again, what are the obstacles with which you're faced today? So, our students studied Latin and Greek, advanced mathematics, literature, and philosophy at the high school level.
Wow.
Our graduates went on to Harvard and Yale and Oberlin and Howard. They became scholars and judges, people like Dr. Charles Drew, Benjamin Davis. They were artists and civil servants. But something was true then that is still true today.
Which is?
Our excellence frightens people. Excellence frightens people, especially when it comes from Black children. From those people that you feel that they can never measure up. You have bought into a sense of superiority. And then when you realize that there's really nothing that special about you, and that given half the opportunity, they quickly excel maybe past you, it becomes very concerning. Understand, this is not just a white supremacist ideology. This is also an ideology of anyone who feels that their superiority or their sense of self is tied to feeling superior to someone else. So we also see it with the patriarchy. So this fear was directed not just at Black children, it was also directed at Black. And so there were benefactors and there were some Black men as well. And you always find the oppressed sometimes siding with their oppressors. So there would be women in that count who felt, well, who is she? And how dare her have these expectations of our children? It's too difficult. They began to push vocational training as the ceiling for Black students. And at this time, Booker T. Washington was riding a wave. I said, no. I said, Black children deserved intellectual rigor, not containment. That resistance made me difficult.
The famous
terms
word.
that
Yeah.
Black women are tagged with. But let me translate that word. Difficult just meant I would not defer. I would not soften, and I would not apologize for competence. So I was rewarded by being fired. And how many Black women just got their pink slips from the federal government of the United States of America?
Yeah, 300,000 plus.
Yes, despite my success, I was removed, not quietly, but deliberately, and nothing has changed. Replaced by a man, less qualified, more agreeable, more acceptable to male authority, Black and white. This was not about pedagogy alone. Don't limit it to just pedagogy. This was also about sexism. This was about discomfort with a woman who would not yield, which is why I have also written these words. The position of woman in society determines the vital elements of its organization. And Thomas Sankara, though he was never a student of mine, certainly understood
the role of
that concept. So I dealt with white supremacy. And I also dealt with patriarchy because patriarchy is alive and well in Black institutions as well. Black men elevated, Black women expected to support, not lead. Men may boast of inherent inherent justice of their laws. But the Black woman has had no voice in their making. After I left the M School, I began my studies at Columbia University. I eventually then transferred some of my credits to the Sorbonne in Paris. And at 65 years old, I earned my doctorate from the University of Paris in French. And my dissertation examined medieval European attitudes towards slavery. I think it is worth reconsidering today and perhaps juxtaposing it with the French attitude towards the peoples that they colonized in Africa and their ongoing relationships with those nations today. Don't you think that that would be a rather enlightening topic to take on?
It will be, and it will probably also cement the fact that when you were talking earlier about the role the church plays, but they are quite willing to be conciliatory on Sunday, but yet condescending on every other day. The French also plays a similar type situation. They don't quite agree that there is racism, but then they also don't see race. They also underplay the impact of racism with they've got this mindset that everybody is French. And so how can they possibly be racist if indeed everybody is, to them, colorblind, as it were?
Except we see them on their streets, saying and acting otherwise.
That would be the
All
case.
right. So I know we don't have that much time left. And so let me just share very briefly. I had the great honor to walk alongside some people that I believe you all would know and consider giants. E.B. Du Bois, Ida B. Wells, of course, Mary Church Terrell, who was my classmate, the Grimkeys, with whom I forged a really close relationship, ended up actually writing about them. Charlotte Fortin Grimke, worked with Evelyn Shaw, and in fact, Helen Apple Cook, Ida B. Wells, Charlotte Fortin Grimke, Mary Jane Patterson, Mary Church Terrell, Evelyn Shaw, and I formed the Colored Women's League in Washington, D.C. I was also very instrumental in ensuring that although the YWCA and the YMCA, who discriminated against Black people and wouldn't serve us, I made sure that we had equivalent services for the hordes of Black people who were migrating north to make sure that we could support them. And sometimes some folks stayed in my home as well. I spoke for women's suffrage, for Black voting rights, for peace during the world wars, for democracy that did not stop at the water's edge. There was a lot that I was fortunate enough to become involved with. There are institutions that are named after me today. In Richmond, Virginia, the Anna Julia Cooper School. Wake Forest University has the Anna Julia Cooper Center on Gender, Race, and Politics. Spelman College has the Anna Julia Cooper Professor of Women's Studies. There was a commemorative U.S. postal stamp in 2009. Reflecting my impact on education, civil rights, and feminist thought. And there's been just so much that I have been able to do. Some things that your listeners, your viewers may not be aware of is, in addition to co-founding the Colored Women's League, I also spoke at the World Congress of Representative Women. And my speech was titled, The Intellectual Progress of the Colored Women of the United States Since the Emancipation Proclamation. And then in 1900, I attended the first Pan-African Conference in London. And I joined its executive committee, advancing the notion of Pan-Africanism and Black internationalism. And then after I earned my PhD, I told you at age 66, I bought my home in LeDroit Park neighborhood of Washington, D.C. There is a circle and a park there that's still named after me today. I believe I am the only woman who has a circle named after her in D.C. I became the president and later the registrar of Frelinghuysen University, which is kind of like a community college. It was a community-focused institution for African-American adults. So African-American adults who wanted to become more literate could come, and while they were working their regular jobs, living their regular lives, they could also come and get an education. And in fact, when the university was struggling with their mortgage, I moved the institution to my own house just to make sure that we continue to offer much needed services to my community.
Wow.
And I died at age 105 in Washington, D.C., and I was buried in Raleigh next to my husband. Think I will stop there and take any questions that you may have.
Yes, since you mentioned Sorbonne and the fact that you went to London, this would probably be...
Went to London to see the Queen. Had to say that.
Yes, in light of the United States' role in the world. At the Pan-African Congress, you delivered a speech where you termed the problem, the Negro problem, as global, which meant you linked colonial Africa, the Caribbean, and Black America as one unifying entity. And as a result...
And that was in 1900.
That was in 1900.
How is it that we're still debating that point in 2026?
Which begs the question. If we saw the empire as a system then, what has changed?
Has anything changed?
I'm asking you the question.
This is what I would say to that. I'm Episcopalian and have been honored by the Episcopalian Church as well. I think that sometimes our study of the Bible, and I use that word loosely because most people who say they're Christians have not really studied the Bible. I think that it serves to dull our senses in terms of making any other connections and figuring out how else to combat the challenges of our time besides just praying and hoping. And I think that some elements of the Christian church have been rather effective because we are very spiritual people, have been rather effective in
Nurturing.
Yes, nurturing is a good word, putting us to sleep, so to speak, and creating these, not creating, but emphasizing these very artificial barriers and boundaries that were drawn up by others. And actually, to a large degree, the church was complicit.
Very much so.
In drawing up those boundaries, maintaining those boundaries, and benefiting from those boundaries.
Yeah.
And so I'm appreciative of the opportunity to talk with you and even those who are listening or watching and encouraging us. One of the hallmarks of my life is discipline. I don't feel we are as disciplined as we should be. We kind of want things to just happen because we think they should happen. But there's a discipline of study that allows us to make connections and think more deeply and then figure out how to be more creative in problem solving. I think we've gotten away from that, too far away from that. Not everybody, of course, but I would strongly encourage everyone who's listening today, please do not hear this as an indictment, but I am an educator. You have to work at developing that which you want to see developed. It doesn't happen by happenstance. There has to be some intentionality about it. And the discipline is doing the thing that needs to be done even when you don't really feel like it until it becomes second nature. So if you don't read it all now, just making yourself read for 5 minutes, and that's it.
Yeah.
And then maybe the next week you take it up to 10 minutes. And maybe the next week you take it up to 15 minutes because you have time for the things that you want to make time for.
Yeah, correct.
But also, like I said, when we were part of that literary society, listening to the ideas of others, because that also gets you thinking and making connections. So, yes, I spoke about that really we are one, we are connected. And the fact that we're still so focused on our divisions today is partly the reason that we are still suffering in the way that we are today.
Yes, Miss Cooper, thank you for coming through.
Dr. Cooper.
Sorry, Dr. Cooper,
Thank you.
Emeritus. Dr. Cooper, Emeritus, sorry.
Worked very hard for that. Not to say that that makes me better than anybody, because I committed my entire life to serving my community. So I was never one of those, I'm an intellectual, I'm in the academy, and so I am removed from my people. That was never my way. However, there was certainly blood, sweat, and tears put into getting that degree, yes.
Yes. That said, we've come to the end of this week's episode of Women in Resistance. I would encourage people to get Dr. Cooper's book, A Voice from the South, and it's quite...
There's another really good book that was written. Charles Lamart and S.E. Baum put this together. It includes A Voice from the South and some other papers and essays from me as well. It's called The Voice of Anna Julia Cooper.
Okay. So it's in the Voice from the South, the essays are so accessible, and it will seem as if you were writing them today. Because whilst I was reading them, where she talked about the problem with America, you were like, okay, interesting. That said, like you said, discipline comes from reading. When you read, you begin to see patterns. And then, as they say, those who study their past won't make the same mistakes now or in the future. That said, I do thank you for coming through today. Next week, Women in Resistance are going to mark a 1-year anniversary that we've been doing this.
Well, bravo to you, young man. Bravo.
Thank you. So next week, this is going to be different. We're going to have our audience come in, sit with us, and discuss. So Miss Aya will not be in character. She will be amongst us talking, of rubbing minds as to part of this discipline is how do we grow this thing? How have people found value in? And for people who want to join the conversation, I mean, there are a couple of people who have expressed, but there's still room for more. And if you want to join the conversation, I will put, I'll put the email on screen. So if you send me a message on there that you want to be part of the conversation next week, we'll send you the link prior to going live next week. And then you join us and we'll, as they would say, chop it up for an hour or so and celebrate Women and Resistance 1-year anniversary. That said, we've come to the end of this week's episode. Again, we thank Miss Dr. Cooper. We thank Dr. Cooper for coming through. And next week, it's going to be 1 year. So please do come in. Everyone that has been here from day one, from the days of, what's her name again?
Billie Holiday.
Billie Holiday, yes. From Billie Holiday through to Anna Julia Cooper. It's been one long year. Even for me, some of the women I knew, some of them, it's only in the course of doing this series that I came to know about them. And then you start finding patterns. Sometimes you find that some of them actually knew each other, which you didn't really. So there was a connection. Sometimes you discover that someone was the mentor to somebody else. It's a really inspiring series so far. Next week, please do come in, send me those emails, and I will send you the link, and you can join us. That said, Miss Cooper, Dr. Cooper.
That is quite fine. I just want to say a great, good evening to all of your listeners, or whatever time that they watch this. I understand they can watch this at any time. Thank you so much for having me as your guest. And young people, I really look forward to great things from each and every one of you. I believe in you. And listen, if I can get a PhD at the ripe old age of 66, nothing is impossible for you.
Okay, and one final thought. This Saturday, part of the discipline that we're supposed to inculcate, we're going to be starting another podcast, which is going to be Books, Grill and Books. And the book on this part of the discussion this week would be A Pre-Colonial Black Africa by Chike Ati-Diop. Now, you want to know more? Saturday, p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Come along and find out that we do have a story to tell, as they would say. So, again, thank you. Thank you all in the audience. And until next week, when we shall all be sitting here on screen, having a conversation, it's good night and God bless.
And God bless. Thank you.
That is it for this episode of Women and Resistance. Thank you for joining us in amplifying the voices of women who challenged injustice and changed the course of history. Be sure to subscribe, share, and continue the conversation. Together, remember, we honor the past, act in the present, and shape the future. Until next time, stay inspired and stay in resistance.